This is the Toyota Yaris Cross, and it's all part of Toyota's plan to take over the world. Because super mini crossovers are hugely popular. Just look at the Ford Puma and Peugeot 2008, which are some of the best-selling cars in Britain. So what Toyota's done is take the Yaris, again one of Britain's best-selling cars, and turn it into a crossover. It could be immensely popular, and today we're going to find out if it's a good product. But before we go any further, why not give us a thumbs up if you like what we do, and subscribe for more awesome videos just like this one. Now, unlike a lot of these super mini crossovers, which all look like the cars they're based on but a bit more rugged, the Yaris Cross really doesn't look anything like a normal Yaris. The nose sits a lot higher, we've got a much slimmer grille, and overall the proportions are just a little bit more muscly, whereas the standard Yaris I kind of think has got more of a friendly face to it. Now, it actually shares the same wheelbase as the Yaris, but it's about 20 centimeters longer with the overhangs at the front and rear of the car, and it's also about 10 centimeters taller as well. So it really is a proper crossover. Now, most models come with 18-inch wheels, but the very entry-level cars come with 17s. And the back of the car just shows how little part sharing, at least on the outside, there is between the Yaris Cross and the Yaris Super Mini. The headlights are completely different, as is this light bar at the back of the car. Now, it's inspired by the Yaris, and the regular Yaris and the hot GR Yaris both share the same rear light cluster, but the one that we have on the crossover is completely new. And of course, new bumpers at the rear, new bumpers at the front. It all just looks a bit different. This Yaris Cross is the Excel version, which is the second cheapest in the range, and comes with a motion sensor for opening up the boot. So you can open it even if your hands are full of shopping. And we have 397 litres back here, which is about 100 more than what you get on the regular Yaris. And it also beats the high-end Icona and Renault Captur. But if space is your thing, then you're going to want to go for a Ford Puma because it beats the lot of them with over 450 litres. Still, the Yaris Cross comes with a pretty configurable boot. So the boot floor is actually split into two different sections, which you can either leave in place or actually lower or remove altogether if you want. And if you do that, you can open up even more storage underneath the boot floor. So you're not going to be short of areas to put stuff if you go for a Yaris Cross. Choosing an engine for your Yaris Cross is dead simple because there's only one, and it's this one right here, a 1.5 litre 3-cylinder petrol engine producing 116 horsepower. The only thing you need to choose is whether you want a front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive car. You don't even get a choice of gearbox. There's no manual or automatic option. It's just a CVT, which is like an automatic, but instead of having gears, you just have a variable drive. Now, all cars are what you call a self-charging hybrid, meaning you don't need to plug it in to get any electrical benefit. Now, the pro of that is it's dead simple to use. It will just give you an electric boost at lower speeds, and then the petrol engine will cut in when you go a little bit faster. The only downside is that if you go for something like a plug-in hybrid, you usually get a longer electric range, so you can kind of run your car like an EV, and then when the battery's depleted, you can switch it over to full combustion. And the petrol tank is tiny on the Yaris Cross at only 36 litres, which means that filling it up is going to be really cheap. You just might need to do it a bit more regularly than you would do on a normal car. There are 5 different cars to choose from in the Yaris Cross range, and it starts at £22,500 for the design and goes up to £28,200 for the Premier Edition. And the differences between each model is mainly around some minor design changes and also the odd tech upgrade. Now, at prices like that, it actually undercuts the Ford Puma Hybrid and also the Renault Captur E-Tech. Now, of course, there are also plenty of new and used deals to be had on all the aforementioned cars over at yesauto.co.uk, and that might be able to help you swing your decision one way or the other. Onto the inside. Now, why the exterior of the car looks nothing like the Yaris, this is based on the interior has been lifted pretty much straight from the Super Mini. And admittedly, It's really quite dull, but Toyota has never majored on making its cars flashy. It's all about being durable and practical. This XL model comes with this coffee-like finish on top of the dashboard, and you also get these silver elements on the dash and doors, which give you a slight whiff of premiumness. And that's paired up with door inserts that from a distance look like fabric, but when you actually touch it, it's pretty much solid. There are also part cloth, part leather seats in this XL car, which are actually quite comfortable and have got really good supports at the side. Plus you get an armrest, which you can push out the way if you don't like it. The steering wheel though is a bit of a highlight because it genuinely feels quite sporty. Now it's the same one that you'll find in the regular Yaris as well as the GR Yaris hot hatch. In fact, the GR Yaris was one of my favourite cars of 2020, and you can watch my review of that by clicking the link in the top right hand corner. On the tech side of things, you have a 9-inch touchscreen that's running the latest version of Toyota's infotainment system. It's not all that flashy, but it's very easy to use, and thankfully you have support for Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which just bypasses the whole system altogether. The instrument cluster is a mix of analog dials for things like your charge and fuel, and also a digital panel for the likes of your speed. And as is the general theme of this car, it doesn't look all that great, but it does the job. But to end on a high, we have physical buttons for the climate settings and also the heated seats, and that's always a winner in my book. Now it's worth noting that if you go for the very entry-level cars, you get an 8-inch panel instead of the 9-inch infotainment screen, and the very top spec cars come with a 10-inch head-up display. Overall though, while the cabin isn't all that interesting to look at and some of the plastics are seriously cheap, it should be relatively hard wearing, and it's also very well equipped no matter which car you go for. Things get a little bit tight in the second row of the Yaris Cross. Now I fit in pretty much anything because I'm just under 6 foot, but my knees are almost touching the back of the front seat, and headroom is a little bit better, but if you're over 6 foot, it's going to be a bit cramped back here. There is no armrest, however you can lower the middle seat and get a couple of cup holders, but it does look a little bit makeshift. And as for charging, well, there isn't any. So if you're sat in the back and in a long journey, just make sure you charged up your phone. The Yaris Cross might not be that much bigger than the Yaris Supermini, but it actually feels like a more substantial car on the inside. And it might be because the bonnet just seems like it's a little bit higher. I also feel like the dash feels like it's a bit higher as well. So you feel like you're in a much bigger car than you actually are. Now, that's not to say it in a negative way. It's sometimes quite nice to pay small car money for a car that does feel genuinely quite big. And the great thing is visibility is good as well. I've got great visibility out the front, and also I feel like with that elevated driving position over a regular Yaris, it does just feel easier to maneuver. And that's partly down to some great controls as well. The steering is really very nice indeed. It just feels very similar to what you get in the GR Yaris, which again is a big thumbs up in my book. So while it's not brimming with feel, this isn't a performance car after all, it does feel very direct, and it's got a nice bit of weight to it, so you can gauge the size of the car really well. And again, it adds to that feeling of driving something more substantial than just a Supermini on stilts. There are also different driving modes as well, so I've got it in Power at the moment, or PWR, and it does generally feel like it can give you enough shove to get up to motorway speeds nice and quickly. Sure, it won't transform the Yaris Cross into a GR Yaris, but does the job of giving you a bit more of a shove. There is also an eco mode as well, which definitely makes the car feel a bit more sluggish, but bearing in mind that we have a tiny fuel tank, you'll probably want to spend a fair amount of your time in eco. There is an EV mode as well. Now, it's not like a plug-in hybrid of where you would get maybe 20 or even 30 miles of electric only running, but it is handy in something like a city setting of where you're only going between 0 and 10 miles an hour. You can just shove it in EV mode, providing you've got enough charge in the battery, and you can do a fair bit of zero emission running. And speaking of that hybrid system, the actual switchover between the electric motor and the combustion engine is really smooth. Now, we've got a 3-cylinder engine in here and they can be a little bit clattery, but in all fairness, Toyota really knows what it's doing with 3-cylinder engines and it feels super smooth in here. So when it's coupled up with that hybrid system, you don't feel like you've got this sudden snap going from nothing to combustion engine. It's quite a smooth transition. Now, I've got a lot of positive things to say about the Yaris Cross, but there are some things that I've not really gelled with. Now, the first thing is the CVT. It's not a bad example of a CVT at all. In fact, if you want to see a car that I really didn't get along with the CVT, click the link in the top right-hand corner. But it just can be a little bit noisy. So when you put your foot down, a CVT, what it'll do is it'll basically find the optimum revs and stay there, and your car will just suddenly start increasing in speed. Usually we associate revs with speed, but it's a different thing in a CVT. The only problem is though, is that when you put your foot down or even at lower speeds, it can just run harsher than it would be on, let's say, a normal automatic. Another thing I'm not all that fond of is the ride quality. Now, being a crossover, I thought it would be a little bit more softly sprung to be able to cope with rougher road surfaces. But if you're on a beaten up road like I'm on at the moment, the Yaris Cross can be a little bit uncomfortable and it transmits quite a lot of vibrations and bumps through the cabin. And coupled with that is actually quite a noisy ride as well. So let's say you're going along at 60 miles an hour and you put your foot down. Not only do you have the CVT kicking in and revving quite highly, but you also have a fair bit of wind noise coming from the wing mirrors and also some road noise coming through the tyres as well. I don't think the Yaris Cross is going to blow the competition away. I think if you want a car that's really good to drive, then I think the Ford Puma has a slight edge, whereas something like a Peugeot 2008 is going to be a little bit softer and more comfortable. The Yaris, though, kind of occupies a space in the middle of where it's pretty good to drive, it's relatively practical, and it's also well equipped. You know, I've got semi-autonomous driver modes like lane centering assist that will, as the name suggests, keep me in the middle of my lane when, say, I'm on a major road or a motorway. So while it might not be the most desirable car of its rivals, and there are a few rough edges here and there, when it comes to value for money, I think the Yaris Cross might be right up there.